House of Mysteries.
This hotel seems to have quite a history, Mr. Gallagher.
Who are you people?
A research team with special powers.
Oh my God.
She's experiencing the past.
Because we are all joined by our thoughts.
Has uncovered an ancient secret.
I have something I want to show you.
Metaphysically speaking, I killed myself.
But they are playing with an evil force.
What would you do with the power?
You can't save her, Alex.
They have given life to a deadly power.
We're all in danger.
And now a box of little toys
I think someone's in the room, Frank.
has become a gang of little terrors. Pinhead, Blade, Ms. Leach, Jester, and Tunneler. Irene Miracle, Paul Lamont, Barbara Crampton, and William Hickey as the Puppet Master.
Welcome, everyone, to Cinemarcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. And those aren't the only two worlds colliding today, because I'm bringing together the Steve multiverse. It's all coming together in one nexus point, which is this episode, because I am joining forces with my co-host from Puppet Masters Castle Freaks to talk about pretty much the only game that is going to cross that border, like the only one that's going to step outside that boundary. So we will get to that in a moment. I'm very excited. But my name is Steve Guntling. Who else has joined me? Who am I puppeteering here today?
As we all stare awkwardly at each other.
Every time.
Hi. I am Justin.
Hi, Justin. And who's that over there with the drill on her head?
I am J-Van.
We are also being very happy to be joined today by Jarrod Hornbeck from Puppet Masters Castle Freaks, from Talking Terrific Television, from generally just being a good dude. Thank you for coming out to talk about this today.
Of course, man. And don't mind me. I'm just over here guarding and protecting Andre Toulon's magical artifacts.
As you should be. It is your duty. For those of you who haven't picked up on it,
they were guarding and protecting. We'll get to it later. I was doing it wrong.
Yeah, the game didn't really explain itself very well. I should say what we're talking about today is a movie and a game called Puppet Master. Now, that's kind of become the subject of our other podcast, not just the Puppet Master movies, but all of the films in the Full Moon catalog of films. And if you're not familiar with this series of horror movies, it's basically just really low budget, direct to video horror films that have all been masterminded or puppet mastered in some way by a guy named Charles Band. Charles Band is a very important figure for our show and for this show today. He was the founder of a film studio in the 80s called Empire Films International. And they became known for having a lot of kind of low budget genre pictures that would do like okay in theaters, and then they would make a killing on the burgeoning home video market. So probably his best known movie from that era was like Reanimator or From Beyond, movies like that. But there's a lot of movies like Ghoulies and stuff that were lower rent. All of these would play in theaters, but really all the big bucks were coming from VHS rentals. So when Empire Films collapsed in 1988 and Charles Band was setting up his new company, he thought, let's cut out the middleman. Let's not even bother with the theatrical release anymore. Let's go just straight to video, and we can count on much steeper profits. So he partnered up with Paramount, and he became Full Moon Features was born. They basically became the direct-to-video wing of Paramount Pictures, and Puppet Master was their very, very first movie back in 1989. So this movie was directed by David Schmoller, and it stars Paul Le Mat, William Hickey, Irene Miracle, Jimmy F. Skaggs, and features a cameo from our beloved Barbara Crampton, who comes up in many, many of our episodes. So yeah, this was a pretty huge deal for this particular market. There had been direct-to-video movies before this, I believe, according to the internet, and the sources are not very consistent on this. The first direct-to-video movie was called Blood Cult, and it was just like an extremely low-rent slasher movie that somebody shot on like a 1980s camcorder. So you can imagine it looks great. The plot is great. It's a fantastic film.
Yeah, we could take this moment to differentiate between shot on video and released straight to video, because Puppet Master looks like a movie, whereas like
it does, yeah.
Blood Cult and Sledgehammer and all of those really early shot on video, all of the Mark and John Polonia movies and Splatter Farm and trash cans of terror and all that stuff that was shot on video.
Trash cans of terror?
Yeah, man. We could do a whole podcast series just about trash cans of terror. Do yourself and the listeners a favor and don't get me started on trash cans of terror.
These are basically the level of movies that we're talking about over at Puppet Masters Castle Freaks. And so we're going through on that show every week. We are doing a different either Full Moon or Empire feature, and we're talking about it with a lot of great guests. And Puppet Master was the very first episode we did because it just feels like a natural place to start. And plus, we have 14 of these things to go through. 14 and probably counting. I imagine there's going to be more of them. Like
Full Moon is still going, and I wouldn't be shocked if we get some other Puppet Master properties over the next few years. I really wouldn't.
When was the last Puppet Master movie released?
Oh, it was like last year.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. They're still coming out all the time. The quality, Master. I will say, I haven't seen all of them. I've seen up through 3. And from what I understand, the quality takes a pretty sharp dip after maybe parts 6 or 7. But I will say, like the first 3 pretty solid. The third one is the best one that I've seen so far. It's actually like verges on a good movie. But this is a good point to transition over to Justin and J-Van, because I'm curious what you guys thought of this movie and to hear your thoughts on it, because this is a pretty unconventional film for us to talk about in a lot of ways. And I imagine it's the first time for both of you.
Yeah.
No, I watched it when I was 6.
You did? Oh, amazing.
I was going to say, I thought you guys had your own podcast about it too. I thought that's what we were doing here.
Yeah, we both have podcasts specifically about this. I'm amazed to find out that this has a series that potentially rivals Friday the 13th in terms of quantity of movies. I don't know about quality of movies.
Yeah, supersedes.
Yeah, I've seen the same amount of Friday the 13th movies as you've seen of Puppet Master movies. So I don't know what happens in the back half of this, but they go to Manhattan, and they go to space, and a lot of shit apparently goes crazy. But yeah, when this movie first started, I was like, it felt like I was watching the opening to a soap opera almost. And I was like,
it has a little bit of that vibe. It's got that heavy synth music by Richard Band where it's like, it does definitely have that kind of soap opera-y sound to it.
It reminded me of watching Days of Our Lives when I was a kid, which clearly was my mother watching Days of Our Lives and me just going, I want to play with cars. But like the hairstyles. Sure. What'd you say, J-Ben?
Sure. You weren't playing hooky from school just to catch up.
We had a VCR and a lot of blank tapes. So there was because my mom also worked during the day, so this was like throw the tape in, whenever.
I did Days of Our Lives too. That was my mom's soap, and most of the time I pretended I wasn't in it, but I did try to play hooky on the time when Marlena got possessed by the devil. There was a whole arc of that where like one of the main characters is possessed by Satan. I really wanted to see how that played out. She turned into a jaguar a couple times.
Mine was All My Children.
Oh, okay.
And
I was
so
also All My Children.
Yeah, so I wanted to see what Tad and Erica Kane were getting up into at that time, and I remember very much like, yeah, if I was homesick from school, it was like I'm gonna watch. I would always watch Regis and Kathy Lee also, which was like weird, but like that, and then Price is Right, and then All My Children was like very, very much like I can almost like I can taste, you know, the tomato soup and the grilled cheese right now, sitting in bed watching those things. But no, Justin, that's a pretty good point, because we talked about this in our first episode. There's sort of one of the cool things actually about the first few Puppet Master movies is that they all kind of take on the feeling of a different genre of movie. And there is a lot of soft kind of soap opera lighting in this one. And it's shot by Sergio Salvati, who is the DP for a ton of Lucio Fulci and a bunch of Italian movies. So it's got this sort of like soft kind of slick European look to it that the subsequent movies don't really have.
Yeah.
But I can see why you would think that, because it does have that soft soap opera lighting, and it does kind of look like a soap early on.
So yeah, and then also like it's like the style of acting that they all kind of have is also like it's a little bit on the like soap opera dramatic-y kind of without going full soap opera. They don't go full soap opera, but it comes close every once in a while.
Full soap opera.
Okay, look, I didn't want to.
I'm sorry. Is it something I said? I'm just a nasty little bitch. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they do have sex psychics in this movie, so you know that's pretty soap opera.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
This is easily the horniest movie we have.
It is the horniest movie we've done.
I'm glad to be a part of it.
First direct to video release movie we've done.
Yes, which is like I'm kind of breaking my own rules for the formatting of the show. I didn't want to go too much into direct-to-video stuff, and only because that would mean we're playing a lot of High School Musical or direct-to-video Disney
games.
sequels, yeah, things like that. That's mostly what I was trying to avoid. I just wanted to make an exception for this one because this was actually intended for a theatrical release. That's why it's got a little bit more of a budget. It's got a little bit more production value. But it was ultimately decided to go straight to video, and it sold like gangbusters. I'm wondering, J-Ben, if you had the same experience. Jarrod and I talk about it all the time about the video store experience of just kind of wandering around, reading all the boxes. Was this one of those movies for you?
So for this movie, I had confused it with, I think, maybe one of the sequels because I was 6 when I watched whatever Puppet Master had scarred me for life because I basically watched this movie and it was some subsequent Puppet Master because it wasn't this one because I don't think this one could hold a child's attention.
This one's a little slow. I'll grant you that. Yeah.
But I was so disturbed by whatever Puppet Master I watched that I was convinced that my dolls were going to come to life and steal my soul. And I don't know if this like fused with my image of Chucky because I also watched Chucky at the same age. And so I got rid of all of my dolls and I loved this bear and I didn't want to get rid of my bear, but I needed to know if he was alive. So I burned him on a space heater.
Oh no.
He's alive.
Well, this sounds to me like you saw demonic toys. Because
or Toy Story
with the bear,
yeah, or Toy Story.
The sequel in spirit to Demonic Toys, or you could have seen Stuart Gordon's Dolls, or you could have seen Dolly Dearest, which was that one with Tasha Yar and someone else in it. I forget who the other.
Yeah, he has a lot of tiny terror moves. But does this mean you have a teddy bear with like grill marks on it now?
I don't have any dolls at the moment. I'm still skeptical of dolls. Like I do not like when people buy them for me. I'm just like, I'm polite and I'm just like, oh, I'm not keeping this thing. Or I'm like shoving it in the closet because I'm just like very skeptical, just so skeptical. I just like, I just think they're creepy.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, especially when they're designed to be creepy. It's not like most kids' movies that have like dolls or toys that come to life or anything like that. Those are creepier than any of the ones in this one to me. But
when
yeah,
on the face of it, nearly all toys are creepy.
they kind of are. Yeah. And I think Toy Story has kind of warped our entire generation because we assume they have inner lives. And, you know, what if they weren't loyal or happy? And what if they did adhere to the
Toy
rules?
Story is actually, they're mean. They're mean to Sid. Sid doesn't know these creatures are animate.
No.
And so they like torture Sid and like scar him for life in Toy Story. And that's what animate toys do.
Yeah.
It's really weird because Toy Story, I feel like, yeah, there's a meanness to them, to some of them, but it is, I feel like besides Toy Story, the role of dolls in popular culture and like all facets of culture has just veered 100% into the creepy. Like, I feel like you don't even see them in another context besides creepy. It's like every doll that you see is like the likeness of like some little like Victorian boarding house kid who was like killed by the governess or something.
Yeah.
And it's
or
like
he called the consumption.
Right. And it's like they exist for no other reason other than to be menacing.
There's something that I love about a little old lady who loves dolls because she's like, fuck everyone. Like, I don't care how creepy you think this is. There's this place called the Women's Federation here in Austin, and they have dances every Thursday night, and they have an entire room packed with creepy as fuck dolls. And I was responsible for shutting everything down when I was on the board of the nonprofit, and it was so creepy going through the doll room and shutting off every single light that illuminated the dolls. It was so creepy.
Oh God,
Jesus Christ, that's nightmare fuel.
Yeah, it turns into Friday night at Freddy's, and you're just like, oh God, where'd this doll go? Why are you over here? Oh no.
Did that move when I turned my head? Yeah.
J-Ban, have you ever seen Stuart Gordon's Dolls?
I don't know. I feel like I watched a bunch of these movies when I was, so my parents would watch horror movies and they loved them. And I would stand behind the couch and like hit the deck when they stood up. And so I watched an obscene amount of horror movies when I was about 6 or 7, because I would stand behind their
same.
And it was just like, and I feel like a lot of them just sort of mushed together in my memory. So maybe I've seen dolls because I have seen a lot of horror films, both when I was a child and when I'm an adult.
Do you remember if there was a particular moment from that Puppet Master movie that scarred you? I'm curious if we can figure out which one it is.
Track down the scary movie.
I think there were little pieces of brains.
Oh yeah, that doesn't help. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
could you be more specific?
Yeah, that's just in my closet right now.
As you guys work through your 14 Puppet Master movies, you're always going to be wondering, is this the one that scarred Jade Pat for life?
I mean, I'm trying to track it to like when you were 6
it's...
years old. Yeah, there's only so many it could have been, but yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, to give kind of a brief overview of the plot here, which is way more complicated than you might think, and also, like, I would say largely disposed of by the next movie. They kind of like, this is a series of reboots a lot. It starts in 1939 with an old man named Andre Toulon, played by William Hickey. You might know him as the mad scientist from Nightmare Before Christmas, or as the crotchety old man in Christmas Vacation. Lots of Christmas stuff. He's Andre Toulon, the Puppet Master, and he is being pursued by Nazis who want the secret that he possesses that allows his little puppet creations to come to life and do its master's will. But he kills himself before they have the chance to get that from him. Then we jump ahead 50 years, and we're still in Bodega Bay, California, which is where Hitchcock set a lot of movies, like The Birds was set there and stuff like that. And it's a bunch of psychics have convened on a hotel to they're trying to get to the bottom of the death of one of their kind of psychic collaborators, fellowship. Yeah, what would you call that? I don't know. It's kind of like a book club for psychics. But they
I was going to say this is kind of like The Big Chill, but with puppets.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Because they were all also like
Big Chill people were likable.
And you don't know they weren't puppeteering Kevin Costner in that casket. You don't know.
Yeah, and that was the thing. It's like they all have like a premonition, and then they find out that he was dead, and they were invited to his, funeral or whatever this is. It's definitely not a funeral.
Yeah, and they all have kind of different spins on psychic powers. So like one guy can see things in his nightmares. One woman has just like premonitions. She can see into the future. And then the other two are the horny psychics. They're the ones that can tell, they can pick up on like, what was this? Like residual sexual energy in a room or something. And then they just like get all horned up by it. It's a weird,
The way that they explain it is that the female of the couple, the lady, has the ability to like feel memories of objects and like the history of an object, but she just hones in on all the horny moments.
Yeah,
she ignores everything else.
Yeah, he's like, oh, look at this like 17th century heirloom. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's great. But did you know that last week 2 people fucked on this bed?
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, in the 1940s, 2 women had a little tryst in this bathtub.
Can you please scan this murder weapon? We're trying to get to the bottom of something. Yeah, in a minute. I'm in the shower.
Yeah. Like, look, I'm having a moment and I need some time to process this.
It's of course kind of part of the stock and trade of exploitation, like low budget movies like this, to have your decent amount of like sex and nudity just to kind of bring people in. I would say the full moon movies are a little more reluctant to do these than a lot of other movies kind of this ilk. But sorry, what were you saying, Javen?
Yeah, but it was really funny because like in traditional horror movies, you have like flashes of nudity. They really like they really just relaxed into the shots of the nudity and sex. Like it was just an extended bathroom scene.
Yeah.
Extended sex scene. It was just like they're very leisurely paced about it, as opposed to a little bit of titillation and then
Get it?
Well, J-Ben, I can't wait for you to meet a little man named David Dakota.
Oh boy.
The interesting thing to me was just how absolutely like dramatic she was about all of it too.
Yeah.
To the point of where like her partner thought she was in danger. She's like, "Are you okay?" And then she's like, "Oh yes, there's 2 women in here." And he's like, "Oh, tell me more." And like, if this was not consensual 2 partners, this would have been the creepiest thing ever to watch.
Yeah.
But
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking the rest of the plot, like this makes it sound a lot seedier than it is, just because there is like this big chunk where 2 psychics are just boning down, but the rest of this, excuse me, the rest of the movie's kind of going for almost like an Agatha Christie vibe, like a closed room mystery, until the puppets show up and they start murdering people. But like, yeah, that's kind of the weird vibe that this one is starting to strike. Like it's trying to be. It feels like it's trying to be a little classier than it maybe is.
And that's where I got like the soap opera feel. That's one of the things that gave me the soap opera
thing,
feel, which was like they were being very like prim and proper. The hairstyles were great.
So that's the word you'd use.
Okay, yeah, I am so curious about how Paul Le Mat, our lead actor here, achieved that hair in this movie. It is simultaneously lush and receding. It is both like it is coming in stronger than ever and going away at an alarming rate. Like it's hard to pin that down.
Yeah, I mean, only Buffalo Bill is the only other person I can think of with the same issue going on there.
For whatever reason, the word bouffant comes to mind. I don't even know what that word means.
No, you're using it right. I
think it's a hair-related thing.
Well, there's something that goes on during this time period. Is like they basically have professors of anthropology, and I studied anthropology, so I always think it's hilarious when they have these like, I'm a sexy professor, hair flip, I'm smoldering. Like, no, that is not what an anthropologist looks like.
No.
Well, that's news to me, and it's disappointing, frankly.
So there goes all my anthropology-based /fiction.
Yeah, I was gonna take an anthropology class just to like meet people, but now I don't know.
Nope, withdraw.
Turned me off on that one. Yeah,
I think Indiana Jones had a similar effect on the paleontology field too. Yeah, no one's painting their eyelids for that guy.
I was just gonna say, I love you on my eyelids.
Let's say,
oh, that's right, he is an archaeologist. I screwed that up.
If he was a paleontologist, it would have been a very different movie.
Let's say, okay, how about Laura Dern in Jurassic Park ruined paleontology?
There we go.
There we go.
Sure.
And Sam Neill too. Why not? Yeah. So I mean, I still to this day, like I've read about this movie. I've discussed it on multiple podcasts. I still have a little hard time following the plot of this movie, and I think it's because it gets really saggy in the middle. And it's kind of not until the puppets start enacting their chaos that the movie starts to sort of pick up and have a little fun. And we get a fun little roster of puppets that are going to be the characters throughout the rest of the series. So our featured character, I think probably the face of the franchise, is Blade. He's a little white puppet with a black hat and trench coat, and he has a knife for one hand and a hook for another. And just in case you missed the metaphor, he has blade eyes too, which I don't think those eyes are going to do anything. Like they're too small.
They're definitely not functional. Yeah.
Yeah, and you need to be real close, and it's kind of recessed into his head, so they're not really doing anything. But the blades on his hands are doing fine.
So there are a couple of things so they do try to do a mystery sort of vibe, which I think I got really annoyed with because they, like, in my personal opinion, they didn't have fair play. I feel like they should have shown all the puppets that were going to exist in the opening. Like I would have liked it. Like I don't even think they show Blade's blade. They show his hook. I don't think that they show Blade's blade. You're like, is this a kindly old man? Why did he make Blade the puppet? Why did he make Screw Top or the drill dude? In the leech vomiting. Like how is that a puppet power?
That's just magic.
Yeah, the leech vomiting is very gross. Like, the studio hated the leech woman and made him kill her off in the next movie, but she does eventually come back. Because she's pretty gross. Yeah, there's not a lot of logic to it. Like, and that's a good point. Like, there was never a point where we get to like see the puppets by themselves, and they're like, oh, what weird puppets! Like, and they're not like observing the fact that they might come to life or anything like that. Like, they're just kind of living in the hotel and just sort of like living in the walls, you know?
Yeah.
And the series does go into a lot more detail about who these puppets are and where they come from and how they came to be this way. But this movie is really not very interested in any of that origin stuff.
They're very interested in psychics and psychic powers.
Which really doesn't become a thing. The weird thing that the Puppet Master seizes on from here on out is Nazis. It's becoming more and more like about, I think starting with part 3, it's a flashback to World War II. And then from then on, it's just lots and lots of Nazi content, which is fun if you like seeing little puppets killing Nazis, which who doesn't? But the psychic thing is really not followed up on. And I don't think any of the characters outside of Toulon appear in the later episodes, right, Jaron?
Human characters besides Toulon? So I'm only a little bit further than you are. I'm only through part 5, and I'm going to say the answer is no to that through part 5. Yeah, but I can't speak for the 47 that remain after that.
That's true. They may bring back. Yeah, I don't know what Paul Lamatt's doing these days. He might need a paycheck, but
that's a good point that J-Ban made there. Is that it's it reminds me a lot of ways of like the first Friday the 13th, because you get this mystery that's not a mystery, because the person who is responsible isn't a suspect until they're revealed as being the killer. And so it's just a very sort of Scooby-Doo way to write something where, you know, they pull the mask off and all of a sudden it's a character you've never seen before. And so I do agree that like the puppet introduction earlier would make sort of like why they're targeting certain people or how they're killing people a little bit telegraphed and maybe a little bit easier to understand and not seem quite so random. But also, as you move on and through the series, one of the big changes, not unlike Friday the 13th, is that the puppets essentially the puppets do become who you start rooting for. So you mentioned that the people aren't likable, and that's going to magnify even as the series goes on, because the puppets are going to become the good guys, like seemingly like 2 movies from now, essentially. I mean, I would even argue kind of in part 2 as well, but definitely in part 3.
Yeah, this is the only time they're really like unsympathetic, like little monsters, you know. But it's really all depending on who's controlling them.
And even then,
sorry, go ahead, Justin.
No, you started first.
I was so sad when the fortune teller died because I feel like she had the most juice. Like, like it's just like it was. I thought the protagonist guy was so lame. He was so like, I understand. I read about him. He's won Golden Globes. I don't know what he was doing in this movie. He was so underacting.
He was acting it for his paycheck.
Paul Le Mat, best known from American Graffiti, and gave a genuinely excellent performance in the movie Melvin and Howard, which is an early Jonathan Demme film that he's truly fantastic in. But yeah, by the end of the 80s, it seemed like his career was struggling a little bit.
Yeah, he's sleepwalking a little bit through this movie, especially compared to some I feel like the energy, he's not matching the energy of some of the other people. He's not matching Irene Miracle. He's not matching Jimmy F. Skaggs as Gallagher.
Yeah.
Well,
sure.
he's matching Gallagher before the resurrection. He's definitely like
Sure.
I remember now, like we have the intro to the movie with the puppets, and then we have an immediate cut to 4 different people having psychic visions and going, hey, our old friend must have found something. Let's go track him down because he hasn't talked to us in years and figure out what he found out. When they get there, they find out that he's dead, and they're like, well, shit.
Pick up a phone?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then they just
look, if you have psychic powers, you don't bother with a phone bill. All right.
And then
that's God gave you a way around that.
Once you get there and you find out that your friend is dead, and also owned a hotel with his wife, they just like hang out and stay there for a night and like or 2 and just like live. They like nothing happens other than like they're like low key trying to figure out what their friend found, because they're assuming he found something. Yeah. And that's why he ditched them for so long. But it's not like a detective movie. It's literally just the only people who try to find anything are the psychic sex detectives, and the other 2 characters are just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, a little
just
bit.
Walking the halls.
And that's kind of what I mean when I compare it to Agatha Christie. Like it's they are all trapped in this one space, what's supposed to be one night. It's a bunch of disparate like people from different walks of life, and they're all supposed to be solving one central mystery. But the central mystery isn't really apparent to them, because we get the sense that like this guy has been meddling with the dark arts and might come back to life or something like that. They don't really have any way of knowing that. So they are just kind of living in the place and becoming victims.
And I think a weakness, like what I mentioned, in a mystery, you should have fair play. Mm-hmm. And in a magic-based universe, you should have fair play. The fortune teller had a vision. She warned the lady about being, but she also was going through like doing incense, doing a chicken claw that cuts somebody's hand. Like if this is a world where magic exists, why doesn't her magic precautions do anything? Like I would have liked to have seen the puppets overcome her magical precautions.
Yeah. of the four main characters, three of them die all right next to each other, like at the same time, different places in the house, and they're all kind of anticlimactic. It's just like, oh, was there something rustling over there? Teehee, we're busy up in the bed, and then they both get killed. And it's like there was no fight, there was no struggle. It was just we watched puppets kill some people. And it's like kind of like in Friday the 13th at the beginning, where it's like, oh, you know, that's just people, but nobody knows what's happening. Like none of them know that the other people died because they're all dying like at the same time in different parts of the house. And so we don't get to see any interesting things happen. We don't get to see how the puppets respond to anything. We just see the other main characters die, and then the one guy go, oh shit, where is everyone? I don't know. And then finds them all dead with the guy mystery solved. And they're like,
it was so interesting going back to the beginning. I really liked the puppet cam. And in the initial puppet cam in the opening, they had a sense of humor. Like the guy, and then later on, which I imagine is definitely borne out in the sequels, is having more of a sense of humor about it. And then all of a sudden the puppets become very serious and they're super murderous. And again, leeches don't kill people. Like
these ones do.
What if you had 500 leeches? Would that kill you?
Eventually.
I just think it's also really funny because this guy is so horny and he's literally dying being sucked to death. And
by a puppet.
By a puppet. And it, like, he couldn't tell the difference between a human mouth and a puppet mouth.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, does she have like a really small mouth or something? Like, I don't know.
I was just like, dude, you're bad at sex.
It's like he was getting it on with a woman, and then a bird came and started pecking at him, and he's just like, oh yes, I knew you were just playing around and joking. And everyone's just like, what? You don't notice the fact that there's no weight on the bed anywhere. He's blindfolded during this.
Well, this is like one of the biggest tropes, because to me the most egregious of all of these is I think it's in Halloween 5, where one of the guys is dressed up as Michael Myers on his way to like a Halloween party, and he gets in the car and his girlfriend starts like sucking on his hand, like his hand and his thumb, and like is trying like kissing him on the mouth, and I'm like, or on the mask, and I'm like, this dude like must smell like shit. Like he's a foot taller than your boyfriend. Like it's ridiculous. It's always one of those things that happens in horror movies. Like the killer kind of finds his way into a situation like that. The person can't tell that another person is there, despite the fact that, yeah, this guy has been wearing the same jumpsuit for, in the beginning of part 5, he lived underground for a year with a homeless man.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. He's not going to be smelling great.
But I think with Puppet Master, one of the things that, there's a lot that you could nitpick about the role of the humans in the movie and this and that. And I think in our first episode, Steve and I talked a lot about how really what you're paying price of admission for here is the David Allen stop motion and then the rod puppet work in the movie, which really like that's what you're here for. And I feel like there are moments when that stuff lands and it's like, all right, that's why I'm watching this movie. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. No, I still to this day, I really like the designs themselves of the puppets. And I like this idea of bringing together kind of a group of horror monsters that all have distinct abilities and can kind of like, they're little, but they can swarm on you.
We'll call them the X-Boys.
Exactly.
That was honestly my favorite part of the movie was one, it was a wide variety of puppets. And I actually discovered that some of these were just old puppets that they used for the film. Yeah. They weren't like created for the film. They just like found a few of these hanging around. But then the actual like puppet work was great, especially since this movie came out what year?
1989.
Yeah.
These effects were done by a guy named Dave Allen. He did a lot of stop motion work for a ton of different movies. And he's an interesting guy because he spent most of his life working on his kind of magnum opus, which was this stop motion horror adventure film called The Primevals. But he died in 1999, pretty young. And so he was never able to finish it. But a couple of people, Charles Band and a couple of other people, have been trying to raise the funding to finish the movie out for him. And I think they finally did finish it, and I believe it's going wide next year. So we are actually going to get to see the Primevals.
It's been playing in at festivals and cons and stuff now. So it is finished. But I do think, I think the goal is wide. I think, and probably next year, because I think like it was in. They had it. I was talking to Michael Gingold recently, and he was saying that he saw it up at Fantasia up at Toronto,
Montreal. Oh, yeah.
Or in Montreal.
Yeah,
is it Montreal or in Montreal?
Pretty sure it's Montreal.
He saw it. Yeah. And he said that it was a lot of fun. And then Kevin Lane, who we did our episode with on the Ghoulies one, which dropped a couple weeks ago, he saw it also and did a panel with Charles Band. So it's there for people to see at conventions and festivals and stuff. But I do think a wide release, which is really noticeable for a full moon feature, because even Subspecies 5 got that nice little theatrical run in Alamo Drafthouse, but not a wide release.
Yeah, got kind of a specialty release, but yeah, I mean, we do get a nice variety. Like the other puppets we didn't mention were Pinhead, who's like a big, strong guy with a tiny head and human hands, so he's like the Swedish chef. We have Tunneler, who's got like a drill on his head, who is like, that was always my favorite design, but I think he's kind of useless as a puppet, or as a killing machine. We can talk about that later. There's the Leech Woman, and then there's Jester. And Jester never really, so far, we're 3 movies in, Jester's been in all of them, and he hasn't really done anything, but his face flips around, and that's cool. You know, that's good for him. He's like
some morals as opposed to the other puppet. Jester had like a moral arc in this
kinda movie. Yeah.
And I really liked Jester's moral arc. He's like, oh no, we're bad puppets.
Want to bring it back just a little bit to David Allen. He worked on Willow, our infamous whatever Lost podcast,
our Lost episode. Yeah. I think he did some Jurassic Park stuff. I think he did. He did a lot of stop motion. He was the best. And it's always like noticeable. Like if you're watching one of these movies and you're like, oh wow, that special effect looked really good for this budget. It's like, that's Dave Allen. Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, it's him.
Everybody, I think most people near our ages have probably seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids at some point.
Yes, absolutely.
He worked on that too as the puppeteer.
Written by Reanimator's Stuart Gordon. Yeah. We've talked about that movie a lot. It's got a lot of DNA with a lot of horror, with the horror world, weirdly.
But yeah. And so that, honestly, this movie doesn't make me excited about this movie. It makes me more excited about what they do with the puppets after this movie, because presumably they'll play a bigger role. And in this movie, they didn't really do much. There's the opening shot, then they kill the 3 people, which is interesting. And then the ending of the movie is when they actually all come in and you get to see them like doing things besides just like
you're totally right, Justin. And in part 2 and part 3, you'll get the addition in each movie of one new awesome puppet design, each one better than the last, and you get a really nice cast of characters. I mean, having played the game, you probably have some exposure to some of these guys, but like you have like your basic lineup in the first movie, and it's like, all right, we've got some decent, some different powers here, and they can do some cool stuff. But yeah, I think I can totally understand someone watching this and being like, I like the seeds of what's here, and I'm hoping that with bigger budgets, although that's not necessarily the case, but with
they got a little bigger,
as things move from the 80s into the 90s, maybe we'll get less a focus on the narrative beats of something and more a highlight of the puppets and special effects, and you do, and then that's when you get something like Puppet Master 3, which is kind of the best of both worlds, where it actually manages to tell a good story while also giving you some incredible new puppet designs and a lot for them to do.
Yeah. I mean, by the time you get even to Puppet Master 2, it's clear that they're taking those notes because it's more puppet carnage, like right from the get-go, and it's structured more like a Universal Monsters movie more than like a soap opera or a mystery movie. So, you get that one's it gets progressively more fun before it falls off the cliff. But yeah, and I would actually genuinely recommend Puppet Master 3 almost as a good place to start because it is a prequel and it is kind of resetting the timeline, resetting the whole arc of Toulon and making him more of like a tragic anti-hero rather than a weird old guy who possessed puppets,
Yeah, because that was the thing, is we don't get to know, like, is this intended to be an evil art? Is this...
Yeah, I think they start that way and then it's not the way it continues.
Yeah, we definitely know that Gallagher, the friend who died, I think Neil Gallagher, he was not intending to use them for good.
No.
He was in fact, he was trying to get rid of them because he'd learned how to puppet people, and that was his next maneuver, was he was going to go puppet people now, because technically I guess he was puppeting himself. I don't really know exactly how he came back to life.
Or was his missus the one who killed him and puppeting everyone?
That seems to be my understanding, because like we see her at the end and she brings the dog back to life. So like I think that's the implication, is that she had the power all along, but we never see her again. So like,
I saw the puppet, I saw the dog move, and I just assumed that she had learned something from, like, she had found it too. But now, man, this is a whole different lens that they didn't really pursue very well.
See, this movie has layers, I'm telling you. Yeah.
Well, it's like, I don't know, it's so interesting from like this perspective of, is she puppeting? Is she, like, he claimed to be the puppet master, but they ended up killing him. So how could he have been the puppet master?
Right.
If he instead, maybe he was a puppet who had gone rogue.
Or if this was all some kind of weird, creepy, elaborate setup by her.
Could have been, yeah. No, it leaves a lot of these threads dangling. I mean, like you said, I think there's the good foundation of a movie or of a franchise here, but like, for as popular as this was and for how much it established the series, I don't know that this is anybody's favorite one. I think most people tend to prefer one of the sequels.
And it felt like they were setting up a sequel, but a direct sequel, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because again, like, we show her at the very last scene is her basically puppeting this dog. And I think that would have been an interesting second movie, was seeing like, oh, okay, she was the bad person. When she forced her husband to kill himself, that is when the detectives got notified, and then they all came in, and she was killing them because she knew that they could potentially figure her out.
Yeah.
But like, none of that was in any way touched on or mentioned if that was what the intent was.
Yeah, and they don't really pick up that thread, and they have a tendency to do that. Like Puppet Master 2 ends on a thread that they don't pick up either. Like Charles Band really fancies himself as kind of like a horror Stan Lee. Like he really worships Stan Lee and like the whole Marvel Comics model. So his movies are kind of like one big interconnected universe. They have crossovers with Puppet Master and Demonic Toys and Ginger Dead Man and guys like that. Like they have all these crossovers, and he would include these little video documentaries at the end of every VHS tape that he called the Video Zone, where he would come out like Stan Lee would at the end of every comic book and just say, hey, it's me, the producer, and this is what we've got coming up, and this is how this movie was made, and hawking some merchandise. So he's a huckster and a showman in that same kind of way. But also, like early comic books, they don't always follow through on some of the ideas that they put out there.
I think it's really interesting. The puppets are so iconic. And I think that's something that really shows, from what I've heard and what I've read of the sequels, is that these puppets maintain, especially Blade. Blade becomes this whole like tiny serial killer puppet. But it's so interesting to see how iconic that the puppets became.
Yeah, no, he definitely did get to become kind of like a horror movie icon for a bit. I don't know that too many people will remember having seen this movie, but I imagine if you show them a picture of that puppet, they'll know that, oh yeah, it's from that Puppet Master movie or something like that.
Yeah, and he doesn't get the treatment. So he has a couple of really fun scenes in this movie, but it's in the next movie where you'll get probably the seminal Blade scene.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's so like it just makes me appreciate the design of the puppet so much more. Like here you get him kind of popping up in the top of the elevator shaft and look, like peering around corners, and you get a couple of the little like puppet POV running shots with him. But in Puppet Master 2, we get what is considered, I think, by a lot of people, fans of the franchise, to be kind of the most iconic Blade moment. But I think that is true. We watched a lot of these movies with a lot of little tiny monsters and stuff in them already, and I think that one of the things about Puppet Master that they did really well right from the get-go is they had really distinct puppets, like we said before, that have sort of one quality that stands out about them. And I love that. It's like you can't confuse Blade and Tunneler, and you can't confuse Pinhead and Jester, and you can't confuse anybody with Leech Woman.
No.
So, for instance, when we watched Gremlins and Gremlins 2, I struggled. Gremlins 2 did a better job of it, but I struggled with differentiating between the Gremlins. And then, like you said, this movie, they're all incredibly distinct. You're never having that moment of, wait, which one is this? You're like, I don't know if I know its name, but I definitely distinctly know which one this is.
And I think that might actually be a great point to transition to the game, because I think one of the strengths of the game is that it is picking up on all those differences and distinct natures of each of those puppets and applying it to a gameplay style that like lets you to mix things up and like play to your strengths and play the different levels that you want. Did we have anything else about the movie before we move to the game?
I would just say that if you're somebody who watched this movie, let's say in preparation for this episode and had never seen anything else, and you felt sort of the same way, like, oh, it's kind of slow, it's kind of soggy, kind of drags, it's like the puppets are cool, but they don't not given a ton to do, I would say definitely like don't let that discourage you, and definitely actively seek out the next couple movies. I'm not saying sit through the entire series, but definitely
some of them get pretty rough, I understand. But,
2 and 3 heard you and they saw what you put in the suggestion box and they course corrected.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea what they made on home video? Because I was looking for a number and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's hard to say because the numbers are a little unreliable, and Charles Band himself is a bit of a fabulist, so it's hard to take his word for it exactly. I know this is not the most successful movie that they did. The most successful movie they did was for a label of children's direct-to-video entertainment called Moonbeam Entertainment. They directed a movie called Prehysteria about tiny little dinosaurs. And that is far and away the most successful thing they've ever done. And they said they made something like $50 million on VHS sales with that movie. But this one was up there, and this one did prove the concept. It said like, okay, yeah, this has legs. People are renting this. We can just keep making these movies and cranking out once a month and, having all these little bonus features. So it took them for a long time, and the company is still going today. So in some form, I would argue it's a pretty diminished form now than what it was at its heyday, but it's still going and still plugging away. So they got some runway off of this.
It's reported that it had a $400,000 budget, and it definitely made, I'm going to say, into at least the double digits of millions.
Yeah.
So if you're making your money back, at 400,000 to 4 million would be 10 times. maybe you're making your money back 50 times. I mean, it's enough of a return on investment that Paramount felt good about being Full Moon's video, or having Full Moon be their straight to video distribution for 5 years.
I think it was one of the 10 highest, or one of the 10 most rented videos of 1989. And that was kind of at the year when video was really like hitting its stride and everybody had a VCR all of a sudden. So, you can make a solid bet that there's a lot of castles bought off of this movie. Charles Band bought a castle. It's a whole thing.
Look, honestly, if I ever, and I think I've mentioned this once before to at least one of you, if I ever get rich, I'm buying or building a castle.
Hey,
I want a castle.
He got a lot of legs out of that castle, let me tell you. Well, let's move on to talk about the game. So the game is similar to our movie last week. This is a very recent game. I think Texas Chainsaw is slightly more recent than this game, but technically this one is still an open beta, so it hasn't had a quote unquote full release yet, but those lines get very squishy anyway. But this came out in March of 2023. It's made by a company called October Games, and it's available only on Steam right now. So this started as a fan project back in 2014, I believe. October Games, they were known for a multiplayer shooter called I forget what it's called, like Horror Terror or something like that. I forget the name of it. But they had a little small indie game, and they made this one with all these Puppet Master skins, and then they got the official license from Full Moon and started getting rolled out on Steam. So the version that we played is after a fairly recent update where they added a couple new characters and they added a few new game modes. But similarly to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what we're playing here is an asymmetrical horror shooter game, essentially, or horror competitive co-op game, where one team will take control of the humans and one team will take control of the puppets, and you run around in settings from the movies and you try and take each other out. And this game is unique for us because this is the first time we've all tried to play online. We're actually all recording remotely right now, and we were all trying to play online from our own homes, and none of us are particularly adept at that. I guess, Justin, you play online more than any of the rest of us. So you could troubleshoot it a little bit for us, but I don't play games online hardly ever, because I usually find the environment to be very toxic. And I will say this right off the bat, that did not seem to be the case. I did a trial run where I played an online match just against whatever stranger I could find. And the person that I found, I told him it was my first time playing. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, hop on into the game. Let's do one-on-one, and I'll show you some of the ropes. And he walked around and he told me exactly what I needed to do. And then he let me kill him a few times so I could build up my XP and then use that to buy some perks for my character. So that's the nicest anybody has ever been to me in a video game, and that was super cool. So I appreciate you. Username Guar. I hope you're affiliated with the band Guar, because you were very nice. It's Odorous Arungus himself. Yes. But yeah, so that was my early experience. But yeah, I think we took a little time to get things set up, and then we actually played each other online. So I'm curious about what your guys' experience was with this.
Yeah, I just want to throw in it's definitely, the game is a little on the rough side in terms of polish. It feels kind of like, for people who'd be familiar, playing like a Gary's Mod game mode, which there's a lot of very fun ones. And this one wasn't bad, but there's definitely room for it to go. Yeah. And with it still being in early access, it should potentially get better, but I don't know how much effort they're going to put into it. But I thought it was fun and cute. I thought that the game design was decent. It runs in Unity, so there's a lot of improvements that they can make if they want to. Okay. But we found each other in a match very easily. You just create a lobby, put a password on it, kind of old school, but it works. And yeah,
we were struggling with the idea of matchmaking in Texas Chainsaw, and it was a different thing because this time we had specific players that we were inviting, but we struggled trying to find players.
When Justin, you made fun of me last week when I was like, they should have an AI bot, and this one does. It has an AI bot.
I wasn't making fun of you. I was just saying, I agree. However, it's the studio's decision to spend that money, and a big studio like that is less likely to spend the money. However, it did appear that there was only AI for the human team.
Yeah.
In the game mode that we played that would have used an AI. And then
Which
the other one
because
that we played.
I really only wanted to play puppets, but J-Ben, you were the only one who played with the human.
And I got to play the fortune teller, and I got to rewrite the movie to get her to win and to escape.
And to shoot puppets with a shotgun, which when I saw that happening, I was like, wait, she has a shotgun? And then boom, Steve was dead.
Loved the shotgun, but when I was so annoyed because I had found a Luger pistol, but I had the shotgun, so I didn't want to put the shotgun down to pick up the Luger. And I was like, after I ran out of shotgun shells. I couldn't remember where the Luger was.
Yeah.
So I was like, damn it. And I kept running around to all the bathrooms trying to find the Luger. But it was gone in the ether.
Yeah. But you were a surgeon with that shotgun anyway, so you took me out a lot.
I'm pretty good with shotguns.
You're pretty good. So the modes, the two modes that we played, the first one is called Thief mode, and that's basically kind of the main mode of the game, and it's sort of a spin on the same asymmetrical gameplay that we had in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The one difference being, in most of these asymmetrical games, it's like one hulking monster versus a bunch of innocent victims. This time it's one normal person versus three little monsters who are like a little underpowered comparatively, but working together and swarming, then they can do some damage. And the human character is trying to steal Toulon's secrets to eternal life, and the puppets are just trying to stop him.
And
pretty basic.
I loved in that mode, I loved how we could play the puppets, and if our puppet persona died, we could tap back in as another puppet. I really liked it was a little, the power differential was substantial between the puppets and the human, which I thought was I really liked that touch, because we had to work real hard to kill that human. And like the human could kick us, could shoot us.
Well, and then you're rendered ragdoll.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
which is a nice little feature.
To point out, in addition to that, we were playing against a human AI, not a human player. So the human being the team, or the type of person. And so presumably the AI is worse at the game than a real person would be. If we were playing that against a real person, that would have been a very interesting match. However, it just turned into us beating on them until they died.
Well, see, that would be unless you were playing against a person like me, where I would just be mashing buttons together, seeing what happens, which was my strategy for when I played all video games when I was young. And it really bothered my friends who took time to learn how to play Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat correctly.
Now, you were saying you have not actually played a video game in a long time.
I'm going to say something. People are going to think that I'm being facetious, and I'm not. Jumping on to check out the Puppet Master game here was the first time that I actively sat down and played a video game since I've occasionally, like, at a friend's house, it's like, oh, we're going to play this like baseball game. Do you want to play like a sports,
like Mario Kart or something? Or
no, not even Mario Kart. I have not played a video game proper since I was about 12 and had a Sega Genesis.
Perfect. That's a good note to leave it on, honestly. Like,
But what I liked about this was that when you played in the I like that you had the choice. I like the fact that you could go in and it could be a team of puppets against one human. And I just, I was watching Blade run around and just going right after, like, slicing at people's Achilles like he is Miko Hughes. And just like
in Pet Cemetery.
And just like taking people out that way. There was some fun little things. I appreciate the fact that the puppets made little like Howard Dean noises when they like got knocked down and jumped back up again. There were like touches to it, and I thought there was an attention to detail that I liked. And now speaking for myself, I didn't really get to explore too much in this regard, but you were talking before about like an attention to detail, or you're not sure what people are going to attempt to add to the game to improve it as it goes on. Steve, maybe you know better than I do. Like when we were talking to Nat Bremer about the Puppet Master 2, 3, he was mentioning having worked on story writing for this game, correct?
Yes, yeah. So Nat Bremer, he wrote the book on this series called The Complete Puppet Master's Guide, and he came on our show to talk about Puppet Master 2 and 3. Great guy. He worked on this game. He got to write the backstories for a lot of these characters that didn't have origin stories before this. So basically, when you like scroll over the character and like it gives you the background on him, that's some of the stuff he wrote. I don't know if they're planning on doing a full like story-based single player mode. I kind of doubt it, just based on the budget that they have. I think they want to keep this as like a multiplayer game. But yeah, he did do some writing on this, and he established some backstory for a lot of these characters that didn't have any before.
Yeah, and he fleshed out the actual Toulon's journals, because he was saying that he got to kind of like actually retcon the character and add details that weren't there before, and sort of like write the story himself, which I thought was pretty cool. And it was fun to see that, because I can see I could see my biggest takeaway, and I guess this is sort of like the conceit of your show in a way, is like, would somebody who's a fan of this property be a fan of the game?
Yeah.
And I think in this instance, probably. I think there's a lot here to please fans of the series. It appears anyway from my limited time checking it out.
To throw in some additional information on that, there is actually a little single player mode from what my little bit of research has found, where you play as the puppets trying to recover the lost pages of Toulon's diary. And
as near as I can tell, it's just the multiplayer mode, but just like one-on-one, and you're playing against an AI bot.
Yeah, it sounded similar to that. I haven't played it because we only played the multiplayer, but that the diary pages actually have content on them. And that was that's what Nat Bremer was writing, was those pages.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's like, as it stands now, it's a fun game to like play on occasion with some friends, but it's missing enough going on to be like something to play often.
Yeah, it's an indie production. It's definitely a low budget production, but I did find myself enjoying the little limited time that we were having with this game. Like, and there's the other multiplayer mode, which was the protecting the statues, where like the puppets are supposed to protect the statues and the humans are supposed to destroy it with the help of their little Ravager totems. And so that wound up being a 2-on-1 with you guys picking on me as the sole puppet and absolutely wailing on me.
Yeah, so I think for it being a 2-on-1, having the most experienced person that plays video games in our group be part of the two was rough for Steve. But in addition to that, at the beginning, I thought me and J-Ban were the defenders. So we were just seeking out and destroying Steve as much as possible. And eventually Steve's like, let's get this going. You guys should probably detect the totem or the totem things. And I'm like, I thought that was your job. What do you mean? This whole time I haven't been preventing you from doing this? I've just been randomly attacking you?
This is another like old man yelling at clouds kind of complaint, but like that's my big problem with a lot of online games, is that like you just kind of need to know how to play it. Like they're not really going to bother explaining it to you. You're just going to drop you in, and you just need to kind of know.
And that's where I think maybe a little bit more polish in the sense of like, if we had like a little objective thing up at the top, like small text, just saying, like, I say small, but like text that you can read saying like, attackers, capture the totems or whatever, and then that would have been enough to make us figure out what was supposed to happen there.
But speaking of the totem and the Decapitron, we're getting into Puppet Master 4 and 5 territory now.
Okay.
Let me tell you,
is that what the totems are from?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was doing some solid work with the Decapitron. That was my favorite of the puppets, because similar to in the movies, they all are distinct. they have distinct abilities, distinct stuff. Like some of them have melee attacks, some of them have ranged attacks, but then they all have abilities that are fairly different. So Decapitron, you take your head off and then you replace it with a different head, and now you have a different set of abilities. And that can take you from being like a melee to ranged. Some of the puppets jump higher than other puppets do. There's a lot of fun little things. I only played a handful of the puppets and a few of the totems, but every single one of them was a distinctly different play style. There was one of them that was like had almost no health, and you just ran in and smacked until they killed you, and then you came back as something else. There was another one that was kind of a bit tankier, but still reasonably agile. And then there's some of the ranged ones that differ. So they definitely put thought and time into that. And that, I think, is definitely the game's strong point.
I agree with that. And I hope going forward that these characters are going to get a little more balanced, because like right now, there's no good reason to play as Tunneler. Tunneler does not really have a ranged attack. He's got 2 moves, which is kneel down and drill, which does run out. And then he's got a little sprint action where he can like kind of close the gap between him. And he does a lot of damage if you catch up, but it's a little difficult to catch up. And I feel like Tunneler kind of got the short end of that when everyone else has a pretty diverse skill set. But Blade was my guy. 6-shooter was my guy. You know, like I had a lot of fun with those guys. Jester's surprisingly useful. He's got a knife or darts or like a syringe. Like he's got a lot of different options.
I think the syringe might be to heal.
Yes. Yeah.
But we definitely did. We were definitely in full on offense mode. We were not. Coordination was on the low point until we were playing the 3-team mode. But I feel like it has the foundations of something with some more polish, some more detail. Could definitely be a solid, fun game. Kind of like people to this day are still playing things like Trouble in Terrorist Town and like Gary's Mod Murder. And these are all game modes in just Gary's Mod, where it's like somebody just slapped this together and it's enough to be fun. And so hopefully they pull it off in a good direction, and people play it and people enjoy it.
This seems to have an audience. It seems to have like some dedicated players, and there wasn't too much problem finding people to play with when I was going solo or going online. So I think there's some good potential here. I hope that they can keep like kind of raising money and increasing the level of polish that they have here, because much like the first Puppet Master movie, there's a lot of good seeds here, and I kind of want to see them develop and want to see what they turn into.
Yeah, they also have like a little system of like pickups. So for the human character, you can find weapons. For the puppets, you can find like health and stuff. And so that's also like a fun little thing. It definitely has some juice to go with, but it just needs a little more built into it to make it that level of like Among Us or something, where it's a fun indie game that has enough like playability and replayability that you can get friends together on a weekend and be like, all right, hey, let's play a few rounds, mix the teams, stuff like that. So
yeah, I could see it. Do we have any final things to say about Puppet Master, either the movie or the game, before we move on to our rankings?
I was just going to say that like the one good thing about it in terms of making a game based on a property like this is that Puppet Master has become such a brand name more than it is a film. So like this, we watched the first movie, but really when you're looking at a Puppet Master game now, it's kind of all encompassing lots of different aspects of the franchise. And I like that about it, because it's Puppet Master in name, but you can have, puppets from any of these number of these things from down the line just joining in. It doesn't necessarily have to stick to the rules of, let's say, like the first movie created. And so I like that about it, is that as the movies presumably continue to be made, eventually there could be puppet designs that show up in some subsequent films that are brand new or in production now, or come out next year or the year after, or the year after that, and could be adapted into this. Puppet Master as this kind of brand name is is cool because it's like people are less concerned about it sticking to any sort of continuity to one movie. It's like we just want puppets. We want to play. We want to be them. We want to fight humans. We want to do fun stuff. And I think that they're set up to be able to do that and have it grow within staying under the umbrella of Puppet Master, but not being married too much to having to stick to one concept.
Yeah, and they do say on their website that their plans for the future of the game is new characters, skins, levels, and game modes to keep things fresh and exciting. So hopefully that kind of is what we're envisioning. I don't think this is going to be like a worldwide hit, but for people who like the game, or people who like these types of games, this could definitely be something that that stays in kind of like a rotation. Every once in a while we pick it up, play it.
And it is relatively streamlined when you compare it to something like Texas Chainsaw or the Jason game. You know, it is pretty simple to use and pretty basic, you know, so that could have a lot of appeal, I think.
Yeah, it also the hardware requirements for it are a low to mediumly capable computer from 2010.
Yeah.
And so with the way things have evolved since then, like I feel like this is something that could run on like even some of the more basic laptops. It's not very demanding. The requirements are a processor from, I think, 2010 that was considered to be decent at the time, but now we've so far outclassed it. So anybody can play this game. It's free. That was the thing. I don't remember if we mentioned that. So yeah.
Well, check it out. Well, let's move on to our rankings then. Each week we are deciding if the movie and game we played rank from the scale of good movie, good game to bad movie, bad game, and anywhere in between. Let's start with Justin today. Justin, where are you coming down on this one?
Yeah, I would say in terms of the movie, I think it was a fun movie. I think I trend more towards like the neutral, not necessarily bad, but I wouldn't consider it to be like a super great movie. And I think I'd put for the game good/fun, but with an asterisk of it's still in early access. They haven't reached the full vision of the game. And so if they do that well, I think it'll be a fun, good game. But otherwise, the way it is now, it's a little bit lackluster. But
okay. J-Ben, how about you?
I'm a little controversial. I'm going to say a bad movie with promise. It has the seeds of a good movie. It's entertaining, but I just think that like it's soggy. It's like really wet cornflakes.
Just like the bat scene.
Yeah. And I think good game because I had a blast, like especially playing as a human and running around and kicking puppets and trying not to die was really fun. And we got to play quite a bit compared to Texas Chainsaw, where we were just waiting, and and it's just like, and I love co-op games. So teaming up with Justin to kick your ass was so much fun. Like I love co-op.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
Dreams.
I think I'm going to come down on a soft good game or good movie. You know, it's a movie I like, but I do know that the franchise gets better and more interesting from here. But I still think there is something about this movie that it's trying to. It's aiming a little higher than it needs to, and it's succeeding more often than it's not. So I'm going to give him points for that. And I'm going to call this a good game. I actually enjoyed it. I played this when it very first came out, and I thought it was pretty rough, and I was having a hard time with it. But it's definitely grown a lot, even just over the last couple of months. Like checking back in with it after the latest update is a pretty different experience. And yeah, like you said, it's fun to just kind of like jump online and wail on people with tiny little puppets. So you know, definitely a low budget affair, but it's got its heart in the right place, and I think it's got a lot of potential. Jared, do you want to honorary ranking?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of follow the same place as you, Steve. I mean, the first Puppet Master movie, I think, it's obviously an incredibly important movie for Full Moon. It's incredibly important to our whole endeavor of what we're doing on our show. It's not my favorite of the Puppet Master movies, but I have respect for it, and I enjoy it. I think it is successful in a lot of things it tries to do, less successful in other ways. So I would fall somewhere like between, I would call this like a decent movie more than I would call it a good movie.
Yeah.
As far as the game goes, I would have to err kind of on the side that it appears to me, although I don't really have the qualifications to judge something being a good game or not as it stands now, but it got me interested in possibly jumping on the computer at some point. And like you said, Steve, just wailing on some people as little puppets seems pretty appealing. So it did its job for me in terms of the user interface and how it looked and character designs in it. I was impressed by, and I thought it looked super fun. So yeah, I'm airing that I think it's probably has potential. It's probably like Justin said, a little rough right now, but has potential to maybe turn into a legitimately good game. And so that's where I fall in it. But please, listeners, take what I say with a grain of salt, because I'm very qualified to talk about the movie and the other movies that Steve and I talk about on our show. But you got me here on something where I felt sort of like I was, I don't know what, I was like a dune buggy that was trying to navigate its way through like a river. Like I was just in the wrong.
Awesome is what you're
I was
saying.
in the wrong
sounds
terrain.
Like a fun adventure. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming out either way, man. It was great to have you on, and it's great
I appreciate it.
Merge the podcast worlds. You can hear both of us on Puppet Masters Castle Freaks every single week. I believe the week you're hearing this, it's the same day that our episode on Shrunken Heads is coming out, and that's the one where we talk with the New York Times bestselling author Grady Hendrix, who comes on the show and talks all about that absolutely batshit insane movie. Definitely recommend checking out Shrunken Heads if you want to see something absolutely insane. And Grady was an amazing guy and really fun to talk to. And yeah, we've got a whole bunch of fun stuff in October, just like here on Cinema Arcade. We have a whole bunch of fun stuff in October. We're going to be continuing our streak of horror movies next week. And we're going to be talking about another fairly obscure one from the late 80s. This is a movie called Warlock. This one came out in 1991, but it was shot in 88, shelved for a long time. And it's a fun, magical, evil witch kind of energy to it. I've only seen this movie once. I'm looking forward to getting into it. Still cannot believe there's a video game based on Warlock, but we're gonna play it.
It's not a Western film?
No, it turns out, Justin, it's not a 1959 Western film with the same name.
I got confused on what movie we were doing this week, and I started watching the wrong Warlock movie, so joke's on me.
It's quite different than the Henry Fonda movie that you were watching.
I was pulling up our chat to see what year the movie was released, just to make sure I had the right one, because I'm like, wait a minute, this is definitely the wrong movie. I don't know how I watched 45 minutes of this without realizing there's nothing fantastical or horror-y about it, and this is horror movie month.
You're like, oh, it's building to something, right?
That's when I remembered, right, this isn't this week's movie anyway. So
yeah, R.I.P. Julian Sands too.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Yeah, that's one of the sadder legacies attached to this movie, but I'm still looking forward to talking about it. So everybody tune in next week to hear about Warlock as our horror movie month continues. And thank you to Justin and J-Bam once again for coming along on this wacky little journey with me, full of murderous puppets.
Yeah, and if you hear drill sounds underneath your bed, don't investigate. Call for help.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'll be in a sexual psychic stupor at that point anyway. But either way, I'll call for help. All right, y'all. See you later. Bye.
Adios.